ICRISAT on their 40th anniversary. It's a tremendous achievement, tremendous accomplishment. So, as an international institution, this is a place that I'm sure that we're all proud of how great you have been, and with the accomplishment on the PGMP work and also on the food chain and various initiatives, you've done a tremendous work in making impact in the countries, in the continents. So, as Graham mentioned, I have a dual or a triple role in the foundation. First of all, coming again from private sector, I do believe in what was mentioned earlier, that agriculture is a business, and we have to think in terms of markets and linkages to make agriculture work, especially for the poor. Even though I will not venture to go into this topic of the poorest to the poor or the poor, either way, I think we are the poor is what we're dealing with. So I definitely believe in the cascade phenomenon that happens if you're able to accomplish, even if it's a $5 farmer or $2 farmer, you're going to have an impact on the lower one. But today's discussion, I want to give you a little bit of a perspective about what the foundation has been focusing on, specifically in the areas that have importance to this region. I will go through some of the strategy development and some of my views on what I think are important. I want to wrap up with a couple of slides on the South Asia context, which is my responsibility in terms of agricultural development for the Gates Foundation in India and Bangladesh. So, with that introduction, I think one of the things I noticed when you were on the afternoon session is pretty much everything that you want to say has already been said, and I fully agree with what I heard from Willie Dar or from Nigel Poole. They all really made fantastic presentations. The facts have been very clear. We heard about the perfect storm and situations happening around the world. We also have heard about things which we can do or things which are moving towards, but I really think what is required is a more concerted action to get things done. So let me start on the first slide here. Which I can figure out. Oh, I see. Thank you. Okay, so the question about are the poor farmers an opportunity or a liability? I think the question has been raised before, and I'm starting the presentation with my own senior boss who has said that it's a problem. It's not a problem to be solved; it's an opportunity. And I really believe in that. 4 years ago, in the private sector, I was in a role where we were following money, trying to make money for the corporations. But about 4.5, 5 years ago, moving into this world, I really find there's a lot of opportunities for the companies to make money, and also it's an opportunity for the farmers to come back also. So I think it's all in the perspective. And more recently, very recently, early September, there was this joint report from the 3 organizations, which we see here, which also have recognized the importance of poor farmer and how they can contribute to the global, how they can help the global food security. When I summarize what are the main constraints, again, we all heard about them in different ways and forms. These are the main things that I put in as a nutshell, what I'm seeing as issues to be addressed. Abiotic factors, market logistics, political instability in many of the countries we work in, we face, and again, including weak policies. And finally, as Bina mentioned about some of the social issues affecting rural livelihood areas, and we rarely have access to, so they are really almost impossible to reach some other remote parts in Orissa and some other places like that. So what we have done at the foundation is we have set up a goal for ourselves for sub-Saharan Africa to increase productivity of the about 30 million farmers by 170%. A very, very large, big goal. For South Asia, we have a similar goal with a higher number. The reason being the population is also substantially higher, and what we want to do is compatible with the Millennium Development Goals. That is basically our thinking at the foundation. When I was given this topic about can the smallholder farmers come out of poverty, my quick answer was with a resounding yes. And what I'm hoping is, as we go through our own strategy and what my thinking is on this thing, you will also be convinced at least a little bit, be a bit more receptive to agreeing that it is possible. And I think our strategies, the new strategy that the Gates Foundation has developed and has started implementing right now, we're essentially approaching that way. We are looking at a two-pronged approach. First, as a global continental investment, which involves discovering, development of new technologies, application to develop public goods for dissemination. That is the first strategy. Focusing on specifically certain geographies. We cannot be everywhere, we cannot do everything, so we had to focus. So we made a concerted effort for a specific, deeper engagement in specific regions of the world, which is basically in South Asia, which includes India and Bangladesh, and in West Africa and East Africa. So as I mentioned, in South Asia, I have responsibility for India and Bangladesh area. And within that also, in India, we decided to do a focused effort in the states of Bihar and Orissa, essentially the eastern parts of India, and just the fact that these two regions have the biggest number of poor people and have the most need. So what we have done in our strategy development is, number one is that we are very new to this agriculture development. The Gates Foundation has been doing research or program investments for the last 5 years, approximately 5 to 7 years. There have been organizations here who have done this for 30, 40, 50 years, much more than us. So we definitely want to capitalize and learn from others, especially the mistakes that they have made, so we can avoid those mistakes. And there's a lot to imbibe from others, which we are trying to encompass. And also from our own data, our own work for the last 5 years. Over the last 5 years, and I think our program started in about 2006, 7, 8 time from onwards, and whatever opportunities came, whatever people came to us to look at programs, we invested. But we all learned a lot from those points. So what we decided is to seek expertise from a lot of people. Some of you are here already. To ask them about what we are doing, what we are thinking, what we have learned, and get their comments. And in many cases, direct criticisms also. What we should not be doing, what we should be doing better. So that we are really used to try to capitalize on that as we develop our programs. And we are, of course, decided to focus on a few staple crops, which we'll go through again later on, but mostly the crops which most other poor people eat, including rice, wheat, cassava, legumes, and also on livestock opportunities. While developing the strategy, we also decided to focus on some of the key guiding principles. Number one is being that we want to have sustainable practices, which is essential to what we do. Optimal utilization of inputs in organic or inorganic, depending on the context. We are a firm believers of biotechnology and the power of biotechnology. And coming to a place like ICRISAT, where science is supreme, I really have no hesitation saying that we do support a portfolio of programs in biotechnology. But biotechnology is not the only solution. It's a tool that can be applied at the right place, at the right time, in the right context. We also believe in empowering the farmers. That is one of the essential ingredients that has been probably missing or could have been improved, which working with all populations whenever possible, and also working through developing the social capital in these places. We mentioned about livestock. In the poor families, livestock is an integral component. One of the first things that a person tries to, after he has enough food, is to go for either chicken or in some cases goats or essentially into cattle. We have seen the importance of that in increasing the income at the families. So essentially that is core to our strategy. Finally, all these things cannot be done without a very strong supportive policy environment where we need to work with the governments, whatever it be, to make sure this is sustainable too. So I think when we look back, it may be good to reflect on what are the smallholder farmers. We heard a lot about this already today, but I think that doesn't need further definition. What we call it is about $1 farmer. And in discussing things about specifically about Indian context, I really have not been hung up much on whether it's a $1 or $1.50 or $2. It really doesn't matter. I think we are trying to make a difference in people who really do not have access to a lot of those things. So if you focus with that in mind, I don't think we can go wrong. But the most important thing I want to say is we focus on the key word here being the word her family. I think This is where the importance of the gender comes in, women come in. And from our perspective, I just started to click one more. Here there is a lady, her name is Abigail Mohanjal. It is one of my first learnings, and when I took some field trips in Kenya, I happened to meet with her, and she really told me her story, and that really changed a lot in my own thinking about why is agriculture important for smallholder farmer, and what is a woman farmer's life. Essentially, she's left with no resources to do anything. It is really touching to see when you really talk and walk the farmer's life. It's a lot we can do. She has no access to information, no access to input, no access to water, no access to land, no access to anything. And this woman, when I talked with her, she tells me I asked her what's her income, and basically it's about $1 she makes. She has a family of six, four kids. Husband who works about 300 miles away, so he shows up once in 3 months for a conjugal visit. That's basically probably it. And she supports her husband's family also, her parents also. So I asked her, what do you do for if you need a spare time? First of all, there's no spare time. She runs the household. And secondly, she makes candles. She said, every candle. How much do you get out of it? About 50 cents more sometimes. Sometimes you get all any. So when you really look at it, get brutally honest, there is really such people. So that shocked me about 4 years ago. And that changed my perspective to look at things which she can make use of. So when I evaluate technologies at the Gates Foundation, I have to frequently go back to Abigail and think whether this is indeed something that she can use. So if we all start thinking in terms of what technologies can be really used for this person who really hasn't been exposed to anything, I think we'll come up with the right answers in this research or not. So at the center of as we develop our circle here, so the woman in the family, the center, she lives in a community, and then she lives in a bigger, broad ecosystem, which is again much bigger level as a nation and then globally. We are somewhere out here in the far away place when we make our grand, we are somewhere here, the global system. So what we have to do is constantly think about how do we get to this person crossing all these circles. That is essentially the circle of that's the way that the Gates Foundation has started thinking very seriously nowadays. So I think it's important to portray that. Given this, we have developed a framework which accomplished a couple of things which I want to point out. We are organized into 3 main areas here. First of all, research and development, core to what we do. Our organization and the money came from technology, so we are very much into science and technology. Crop improvement, livestock discovery, and some crop management also comes in that area. Agriculture policies all across the board, from country policies to collecting and collating the right data and analyzing the data. Access and market systems is extremely important because many times access is the key issue. And finally, we also are looking at strategic partnerships, including finance aspects of it. This leads us to develop the scope for what we work on, essentially our anchor countries and other countries that collaborate with. And then leads to products which is our priority, crops and livestock. Then one topic we did not discuss this morning is the scale and the scale of operations. At the Gates Foundation, we really aim to scale up things to a substantial level. Because many of the programs in the development world have been focused at 5,000 farmers or 10,000 farmers. We are trying to reach much, much bigger scales. So scalability is a question that we almost always ask whether this is something that we can accomplish when we work on a certain program. And finally, when we analyze our choices, we look at the total investments, cost per farm or the farmer, and finally the ROIs, or the return on investment and trade-off that we have to do as we assess programs. So this is the overall structure of what we do. In this format, I just want to mention to you what we are trying to do in our ag development architecture is essentially using our dollars, our people, and our voice to accomplish all these goals. And what we do is we work through our grants. Well, in the last 5-6 years, we have invested approximately $2.2 billion, and that has gone into 200 or so grants in various ways and forms. So as we develop this thing, when you look at our grant portfolio, it's very difficult to outline the kinds of things we have done. starting with basic research to adaptive research to input production, delivery, on-farm production, post-harvest, and trading and processing, and finally reaching the consumer, which is people like Abigail Mahonja. That's our real customer. And that again comes from the industry background where I come from, because we always to focus on the customer. So that's where this is important. So what we have done is our R&D is divided into these three areas. This is basically all R&D, and here is access and markets, and this is how policy is divided. So some of the examples of programs which ICRISAT also involved with is tropical legumes, one of the very important project which is also near and dear to me because I love legumes. Legumes are the most important thing for a country like India, and also there's an area with a huge gap in productivity. We have several programs which again with ICRISAT involvement hope is important from a sorghum point of view, and wildlife and national market. Just a few examples, some of the grants. But as I said, we are over 200 plus grants now, which again continues to evolve, investing all the way from basic research, including technologies like biological nitrogen fixation in cereals to C4 rice and things beyond, all the way to market access. So we're coming again to the science and central science in the ICRISAT, which we heard the word orphan crops here. We hate the word orphan crops, but these are crops which have not seen enough research. Pretty much, I listed only legumes there because I really think that's a huge gap which needs to be addressed. The microbiome, which is essentially the microorganisms, a lot to be done there. At this point, I heard up to maybe about 10% of the microbes are still understood. The potential of microorganisms is phenomenal, so there's a lot more to be done. Livestock also has so much potential in terms of improving. So we are using the power of science and genomic optimization. There's been revolution in plant breeding in various ways. You all know all these things. Essentially, the plant breeding of 21st century is very targeted. Market-assisted breeding is helping a lot. There's tremendous progress, but focusing on some of the crops and some of the regions for adaptive research is what we are targeting for. Now, another point we heard this morning a couple of times about ICT and the power of information. This guy, farmer here, and the guy I met in I think it's in Kenya, I believe. He's so proud to show off his phone, and the point is he really uses, because he has 2 farms in 2 different places. He's one of those progressive farmers who's more than $2 farmer, but he is really taking advantage of how he can sell his crop in a higher price market. And in India, with over 900 million cell phones, the population is 1.2 billion, but it's over 901 phone per person. This one is primarily maize farmer. So that's again very important. So one of the things which I'm asking now is, are we ready for a digital revolution? Can the power of technology and information access be used in essentially helping the poor make more money or come out of poverty? I would say with examples like the Digital Green organization who is one of our grantees here, has seen powerful examples where information can be given to the farmer in the field. Likewise, we can get the feedback from the farmer to understand and assess what we need to do. With the ICRISAT program, which is in Gujarat, I believe that's also being connected with that. So this is an area which we are also investigating in terms of how to do better in the Indian context, also, of course in Africa also, for that matter. Finally, I cannot start this presentation without talking a little bit about the importance of women in agriculture. We started hearing about this morning. A big number of majority of the women are the farmers, are our customers. They are generally happen to be more sensible and spend the money on what they really needs. And so essentially we have insisting that our grants make a metric or measurement for the role of women, how they are promoted. So the question is, this is not a Mel Gibson's title of what do women want, but it's basically asking about how can we make them more inclusive. That is basically the question that we need to ask. It's very important to use, for example, agricultural engineering tools. If you do not target towards women, it's really not going to be finding use at the smallholder farmer level. This is something which we are continuously sensitive to, and also the aspect of addressing the nutritional needs of the families. Again, taking care of this is the thing that women take care of. We saw the slides also about partnership. From my perspective, partnership is the key. We do have resources. Gates Foundation is one of the larger donor organizations, but we really have a small drop in the bucket in terms of what we can do. We absolutely need partnership with a variety of people, including CG centers, which we are our fantastic partners. So there's a Alliance of the Agra Alliance is a great partnership that we have. We are now engaged with Embrapa in Brazil, many private sector organizations, some of them are seated here. We also look at academia for helping us reach these goals. In all these things, I think we are trying, what we are trying to bring back is a farmer-centric approach, and which is core to what this is all about. So finally, to repeat the question, can she move out of poverty? My answer is a resounding yes. I already said that. I think one of the important things that I'm listing a few things which I think is critical to our work is, number one is we need to revive the agricultural institutions here, especially in India. I've traveled a little bit in Gujarat and Orissa, some other remote parts. We seriously lack institutional capacity and a local capacity. It is not building a capacity in an institution in the United States or in Europe. We're talking about capacity in the country itself. So the role of the academia is extremely important. We need to innovate to address some of the big problems. We have done a lot in crop improvement, but I think we have done very little to address the risk, reducing the risk in crops due to pests and diseases. We have a few grants, for example, wheat rust and a few others which we're working on. There's a tremendous amount of more work to do because we have to reduce the risk. Institutional reforms are also critical to our success. We need to incentivize private sector. I think private sector has a huge role to play. We heard from Marco earlier on. I fully endorse this thing, but at this time, I think unless the private sector also makes money, they will not be there to help us. I came from private sector, so I know it's important to make money. But unless they can also make money, this cannot be sustainable. At the same time, they can be also utilized because many times the best inventions are in private sector. Unless we leverage and capitalize them, we will not be able to achieve these goals. We need more public good investments in education and information, and finally, very, very important is that inclusive approaches. So, and the title of this presentation is innovation, incentives, and inclusiveness, which is what I'm saying is most important thing for what we do. I just want a couple of slides on South Asia context because that's my relatively new role. I have the responsibility for our investments in agriculture in these two countries. And the reason is obvious because this is the area which has the highest number of poor, and we are trying to look at what we can do in this context here. Based on our analysis, and I'm hoping most will agree, the eastern states of India are the ones that are most affected, the highest number of people are there. The state of Bihar itself is 105 million people. Who go to Orissa, about 30–40% are remote, very remote, inaccessible areas. There are lots of strategic things which we are looking at right now as we develop our own country strategy, trying to work with ICR institutions, local institutions, governments, and state governments. We have been learning a tremendous lot about what is possible, or what can be done, and what needs to be done. So as we look through our own strategy, one of the big things that comes to my mind is what we heard this morning, the nutritional status in India. It is just unacceptable what India is facing through in terms of nutrition. So I think even though there's economic prosperity, quite well has been done here, India still faces that huge nutritional problem. So some of the few key areas which I'm trying to emphasize right now is focusing on smallholder productivity. The focus will be in rice and legumes, primarily in Bihar and Odisha. What I'm looking at is it will be, instead of just these two states, I may have to broaden the net a little bit more to include some of the eastern states. There's always spillover into the regions. So I think we will try to focus on this area of India. We need to leverage the power of biotechnology, I think, and digital revolution. I think that's also very critical. India has the biggest potential for both these areas, and I think it's underutilized. We still have to work on that. Something which we did not talk much at all this morning, which I'm surprised, is we did not talk about post-harvest, and that's my responsibility at the foundation. about 30 to 40% of the crop is lost to things which should not be eating our grain, or and for either fungal diseases, insects, or even rats, rodents. It's a very rough problem to be here, that after all the effort is gone into producing the crop, it's being lost. So I think that is something which we have started looking to develop a strategy for post-harvest work, and I think that may be a huge opportunity in all these regions, including this South Asian region. We need to continue to develop innovative partnerships at the community level, and I'm emphasizing this part because having worked with the Pradhan and other NGOs here, I really feel that there is still a potential to continue expansion of this thing. Hence my question to Dr. Agarwal about how can we build more Pradhans in a country like this. It's a tremendous opportunity that still needs to be leveraged. Finally, the smallholders have to be linked to supply chains, because even if they produce more, if they cannot sell it for a higher price, we have failed. So I think that is an opportunity that yet to be exploited. The private sector industry in India is changing tremendously, with the last week's announcement about companies like Walmart coming in here. So then we should probably consider making it an opportunity instead of a challenge. Of course, that's something which we can argue about. And most important, I think, is number 6 here, where how can we connect ag, nutrition, and health linkages. That is something that's another huge opportunity that still remains, especially in the context of South Asia and India. Globally itself, that has been a lot been said about that, nothing has really happened. We really do not have good metrics to measure exactly what's happening. How can agriculture and influence overall health and nutrition of the family? So I think I really do not know the programs that go on in ICRISAT at this time, but I think there's a huge area that still is an opportunity. So overall, looking at agriculture development in India, this is my thinking, and I think I thought it would be important to mention that during this talk, because most of the people here are working here. I conclude this talk with once again thank you all for your for listening to me and for giving me this opportunity. I want to congratulate ICRISAT on this tremendous accomplishment, 40 years of very successful, exciting research, and really cutting the frontiers of science in terms of agriculture especially. So thank you all for listening, and we'll talk to you again later.
Giving us this insight in nation's strategy and progress, how they are thinking to feed the 1 billion in the future. I think we are many things that you mentioned. Also, you mentioned, for example, the importance with regard to involving women. You said men and women, but you went to the stage that you called the farmer throughout your presentation sheet. So you have really focused on the female farmer in your presentation and the importance of it, the exclusiveness of women. I think that leads us naturally to the next presentation. It will be about addressing the gender dimension in smallholder farming. The presentation will be given by Libor Slukan. Do I pronounce it correctly? Yes. He is a population policy officer from the Gender Equity and Rural Employment Division in the Food and Agriculture Organization of United Nations in Rome. And since joining FAO in 1999, he has been working on the linkages between demographic factors, agriculture, and food security in low-income countries, with particular focus on analyzing gender disparities in rural populations and promoting gender equitable food and agriculture policies. So we are looking forward to hear your presentation from maybe more socioeconomic policy perspective, and how we can mainstream gender into smallholder farmers.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's a great pleasure to be here. I feel it's very honored for the invitation. Personally, I'm delighted to be with ICRISAT. This is my first time in this institution. I'm greatly impressed. I'd like to join those who congratulate ICRISAT as they celebrate their 40th birthday. The title of my presentation is "What is the role of gender in smallholder farming?" The advantage of titles that end with a question mark is that they imply answers. So straight away my answer would be the role is big, the role is tremendous, and we need to be very serious about it. You know, I come from a FAO where we are particularly concerned about hunger and insecurity. We live in a world where about 900 million people are chronically hungry. Every 6 seconds, a child dies, and most of these children die in rural areas of developing countries. And furthermore, according to FAO estimates, about 1/3 of food produced is wasted before it can reach those who need it. My starting premise is that gender inequalities, and particularly gender inequalities in rural areas, are very much part of the problem, and therefore they have to be part of the solution. I have three key messages to tell to you. The first is that there are significant disparities between men and women that persist and continue to persist in smallholder farming. I would submit very strongly that reducing those disparities would strengthen the smallholder sector and would also generate benefits that go well beyond smallholders and affect the well-being of whole countries and regions. And finally, I would like to emphasize that although gender is a tricky topic, we know that gender relations and gender disparities can be addressed. There is therefore a strong business case for gender transformative agenda. And at the end of my presentation, I hope I will give you a few convincing examples and suggestions. Now, if you look at the literature, we will find a set of themes that are consistently identified as the underlying factors or the most important dimensions, if you wish, of gender disparities in smallholder agriculture. It typically starts at the household level, where women are burdened with a huge amount of household work, and they are also disadvantaged in household decision making. This then translates to issues related to land and other resources, where women typically have much poorer, much more fragile access to those critical productive resources. They also do not have as good an access as men to credit and insurance markets. And by insurance market, I don't mean only formal insurance, I also mean informal insurance mechanisms. Mind you, there are areas in the world, in certain parts of the Arab countries, for instance, there is simply no acceptable institutional alternative to a male provider. If a woman is on her own, there's nobody, there's nothing that can help her out. Labor markets are another dimension where women are disadvantaged, and later on I will show you some data about the magnitude of the gender gap. There are also disadvantaged access to support and protection systems. And finally, we know, and that can again be demonstrated by data, that they are less likely to be members of organizations, and if they do, then they typically do not hold decision-making positions. I will now proceed to show you a series of graphs that illustrate statistically the realities affecting women in agriculture. This one shows the share of agriculture, of population that is economically active in agriculture. And you can see that the bars are particularly high for sub-Saharan Africa and for Northeast and North Africa, where women account for almost half of the agricultural labor force. if we try to reconstruct the trends over time, we don't really see much change in the space of the last 30 years, except significantly, there has been a significant increase of female share in the agricultural labor force in Near East and North Africa. But in the other regions, trend lines are pretty flat. And you will see that it's particularly East and Southeast Asia and also Sub-Saharan Africa that stand out as the regions where women play a key role in agriculture. Demographically speaking, what's also worth emphasizing is the existence of female-headed households, because we know that they can be particularly vulnerable to poverty, to shocks, etc. And the proportion of those is particularly high in Eastern Africa and Central Africa. This is due to a series of factors, an important one of which is, of course, the HIV/AIDS epidemic, which, through its gender-differentiated mortality impact, is partly responsible for these fairly high proportions of female-headed households. This graph shows figures for female employment in agriculture and female unpaid family work. What it tries to say, or what it tries to describe, is the tremendous labor burden that women have to bear. There are plenty of studies that show that overall women work much longer hours than men. And a significant portion of their labor is unpaid family labor for which they are never properly remunerated. This figure, furthermore, shows the prevalence of part-time work in rural wage employment. It may surprise us to a certain extent that in some countries, women employment in women engagement in wage employment is fairly high. This is particularly the case in certain Asian countries, but also in a sub-Saharan country like Malawi. And again, this has huge implications for the well-being of these women. We have additional information which also shows that their position in wage labor is really disadvantaged compared to men. They earn lower salaries, they enjoy much lower levels of job security and occupational safety, with a host of negative implications for their economic situation, but also for their health. This figure shows a breakdown of rural wage employment, again for women and men. It clearly shows that men are much more likely to access wage jobs compared to women. So this is one of those situations where the gender gap is really huge. This table shows the share of female employees in some higher value crops. As you can see, this comes from a series of studies from various dates. The evidence base for this sort of comparison is very, very poor. But the overall picture emerging from this sort of information is that women do play a very important role in commercial production of certain high-value crops. And it's very much a case of the glass being either half full or half empty. There's those who say that this is good for women because otherwise they would be not able to earn income from agriculture. On the other hand, we also know that conditions of employment in some of these commercial farms are actually quite atrocious, and that they constitute a significant long-term risk to the women employed in these jobs. Now, let me move a little bit to another important area, which is one of land access. This table, or this graph, shows the share of male versus female agriculture holders by region. And you can see that everywhere around the world, women hold the minority of agriculture agriculture holdings, and in some countries or some regions, the proportion is really very, very out of proportion of the role they play in agricultural production. These data come from FAO's Gender and Land Rights database. The bars from regions should be interpreted with caution because they are just weighted averages calculated from the very limited country information available. But what the graph shows is a great degree of heterogeneity from region to region and big inter-country differences. In some countries, like Malawi, women actually represent an important proportion of land owners. But, and that is a very significant part, they typically are holders of very small holdings. You can see these graphs describe the average farm size by gender in hectares. And in some countries, you can really see that women operate really on the economic margin. There is also some very fragmentary information which complements this sort of data, this information about land quality. And again, women typically are more likely to have holdings of poor quality. And this is then translated into women's use of inputs such as fertilizer, such as pesticide or farm technology. Again, most of the data available show significant gender disparity when we compare the data available for female-headed households to male-headed households. Now, this was a very sort of typical fragmented statistical picture of the situation. Let me now complement it with something that is a little bit more real. The data that we have shows that 75% of the total crop product in sub-Saharan Africa comes from smallholder farms. 75% of those farms are weeded by hand. Weeding is a very crucial agricultural activity. 50 to 70% of the time needed for the weeding is actually done by hand. It's hand weeding. And 90% of this weeding is done by women. Plus, there is also a very significant contribution of child labor to these activities, and we know that child labor of this type is highly problematic for the long-term future of the next generation. Another figure shows the huge gap in agricultural extension. FAO keeps data from about 97 countries, and from this data we know that agricultural extension reaches only about 5% of female farmers. On top of that, 15% of the existing labor force in agriculture, only 15% are women. There is a very strong and also almost a historical bias against male in agriculture extension. And as a result, it's probably not surprising that only 12% of total aid for agriculture, forestry, and fishing goes to women. So again, we see huge gender disparities. This figure shows also a huge disparity by education. That is a historically determined phenomenon, but actually there is nothing natural about it. This is completely man-made, and it shows the shortcomings in the educational sector and in the social factors that keep girls in schools. So there's this huge area which needs to be looked into and factored. Let's skip this slide. Another illustration of how women are disadvantaged is their access to credit. And again, you clearly see that women are much less able to access credit. And the main reason behind actually is that they are much less likely to apply for credit. Very often because they do not have the core to be eligible for loans. I have 2 slides in my presentation which I would like you to remember, and this is the first of them. It plots World Bank data on cereal yields against the so-called SIGE index. SIGE index stands for, it's an index that measures gender discrimination in institutions, and it's calculated by OECD, and it draws on data on regard that takes into account the legal position of women, legal rights in owning property, and also things like public voice and participation in private institutions. It's regarded to be a very robust indicator of gender inequality. Of course, OECD is not able to calculate this indicator for rural areas separately. So this is just a country average, if you wish. But I think you will agree with me that the emerging picture is quite convincing. The lower gender discrimination is, the higher the cereal yields. So I think this constitutes a very significant business case for addressing gender inequalities in agriculture, because by addressing them, we will be able to provide an enabling environment for greater agricultural productivity. This information comes from the 2010 FAO publication called State of Food and Agriculture, and that report was focusing particularly on women in agriculture. And it allowed us to calculate, with a huge amount of simplification and extrapolation, of course, what might be some of the productivity gains that might be gained, achieved, by addressing gender inequalities in rural areas. FAO believes that by addressing those inequalities, productivity levels in female-operated farms could increase by 20 to 30%, which would then be translated to 2.5 to 4% increases in agricultural productivity at national level. And this would then be translated into significant food security gains for whole populations. But further on, we also know that improved food security, particularly improved food security at female-headed farms, translates almost directly to better health, nutrition, and educational outcomes for children. So there is also this dimension which is directly linked to human capital of the next generation. And here comes the second part that I would like you to remember, again coming from FAO calculations. Give a woman 10% increase in her income, and she would be able to improve levels of her children's nutrition and health as much as giving $110 to a man. This comparison comes from robust data on female and male-headed households. So investing in women makes good economic sense, because by investing in them, we will generate much bigger welfare benefits. Now, I would like to illustrate what I'm trying to drive at by a story of a very concrete woman who is called Valiben, and she lives in Gujarat in northern India. Here are some biographic data about Manjulaban, which might be of interest. When she was 12, her father was killed, and as a result, she was forced to leave the school. At the age of 13, she was married, but had to sell her dowry to pay for medicines for her mother. At the age of 15, she had her first child. At the age of 16, she had her second. And at the age of 17, she had her third. Shortly after the third child was born, she lost her husband, who died in an accident. So by that time, she found herself a female head of a household with 10 dependents in the household. She was forced to essentially dropped agriculture as such, and she started to first work in a fertilizer factory. That was a very tough work. She was spending 8 hours per day in the factory and additional 10 hours around the household trying to care for her children. She hardly slept and she became pretty destitute. She cried for long hours and she didn't know what to do. And soon she ended up taking her first loan, but over a short period of time she became really seriously indebted with no immediate outlook for paying those loans back. But this is supposed to be a story with a happy end, because Valiben joined a very important organization. She joined SIVA, which may be familiar to some of you. SIVA stands for Self-Employed Women's Association. It's a very well-known trade union of female small farmers that operates primarily in Gujarat. SIVA is interesting. SIVA is like ICRISAT, 40 years old, and she provides to its members primarily a very robust set of capacity building opportunities. They work with their members to help them to understand better how markets operate and what might be their market opportunities given their local circumstances. They teach them about good nutrition. They teach them business skills to be able to produce and sell products in the markets. And in doing so, they build their self-esteem. They provide the fertile ground for collective action, and they empower women to a large extent. Now, in Valiben's case, this meant that she was able to start saving. She was able to obtain cow buffalo from SIVA, and all of a sudden her agricultural productivity increased. She was also, through SIVA, able to access social protection as long as it is available through the SIVA network. Would anybody like to guess what this picture is trying to show? Well, this is Valiben's office. She was given a cell phone by SIVA, and this allows her, like very many members of the SIVA organization, to monitor prices in the local markets. And this tool is perfectly applicable even for illiterate women, because SIVA is able to teach them very quickly what symbols to use for what types of prices. So through the mobile phone network that SIVA set up, members of the SIVA cooperative are able to monitor prices in local markets, so they know where to go with their products to sell for the best profit possible. And like this, they also are able to do without middlemen, without the intermediaries that typically connect small farmers to markets. SIVA also directly increases employment of women, because they source a part of the production for their members. They clean these products and they package them in a very nice way. And the SIVA products are very popular they are sold, because they are typically associated with good nutrition. These are really the types of things you would like to eat in order to improve your nutritional status. And finally, by accessing markets and selling directly SIVA tax, members of the SIVA corporation, the SIVA union, are able to directly generate income. And it's a very important status issue, stepping stone for them. So what Valiben's story shows that the five natural capitals, natural capital, physical capital, financial capital, human capital, and social capital, they really matter. If you want to improve the productivity of female-headed farms, if you want to improve the well-being of women, we should be thinking along these lines. The story also shows that rural women are part of the solution. And finally, that organizations such as the SIVA Union, they really enable small producers with better contact to farm, to markets, and have better life. And I would like to end with 2 slides showing or suggesting how we may go from here. So what is it that needs to be done to improve the situation of women in agriculture and to narrow the gender gap? First, I think we need to eliminate gender discrimination under the law. There are still countries in the world where women are simply unable, legally speaking, to own private property, or where their access to that property is only through a man. That definitely needs to change. We also need to free rural women for lucrative activities. We need to reduce the burden of domestic labor placed on them, and we need to actively support the creation of lucrative employment opportunities in rural areas. We need to build human capital of women and girls, and that's primarily through education and improved healthcare. We need to strengthen rural organizations because they have a potential role to play in helping women to share their experiences and also accessing markets, etc. We need to improve the analytical concepts and evidence on gender in rural settings, and I will come to that in my following slide. We certainly need to push for gender-aware agricultural policies, be it by governments or by private investors in rural areas. And finally, interventions need to be bundled. Gender inequalities are a complex phenomenon, and one solution would not make the trick. So we need to think creatively about synergies and how one sort of intervention can link and act in tandem with another. And finally, I cannot resist because I am a demographer by training. And when I look at the existing literature on gender inequalities in rural areas, I'm still a little bit disappointed. I think what we know from the existing literature is very much based on sort of static picture of gender relations and on formulaic interpretations of a lot of stereotypes that are repeated. And I think we need to move from where are we now towards a much more dynamic and nuanced understanding of gender issues in the rural sector. And I would like to suggest a few principles for that. First, I think we should remember that gender is primarily about social structure. Gender is not just about women, it's about the relations between men and women and how they play out, what they mean and what sort of implications they have. Gender relations are dynamic, and they are constantly, almost constantly negotiated. They, therefore, can be changed with the right sort of forces. Men and women have multiple identities. A lot of the existing literature is based on a very simplified conceptualization of rural women as being somehow a homogeneous group. That's not the case. Definitely, there's a huge amount of diversity along variables such as age, class, ethnicity in some settings. We need to unpack these variabilities. Furthermore, we need to move from the concept that men and women have only individual interests. There are illustrations in the literature that show that men are, under certain circumstances, quite willing to give up their, for instance, title to land if it benefits, let's say, the household or the broader family. We need to understand better what drives such non-individual interests and how this sort of knowledge can be used for more forward-looking policies. And finally, we need to appreciate that gender relations are intrinsically difficult to understand, and they cannot be simply read off from whatever gender disaggregated data is available. So I would say that we need to avoid sort of trying to identify differences and then invent gap-filling solutions to them. That would be too simplistic. And I think we also need to move away from recycling sort of orthodox generalizations and trying to see things in a more nuanced way. I will stop here, and this web link will take you to the SOFA publications of FAO on women in agriculture. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much to both the presenters. We do now have 1 hour discussion with the two presentations. And maybe I should, before we start to ask questions, maybe I should try to go very rapidly through the two presentations to highlight some of the issues that were mentioned by the two presenters. And please, I ask the presenters to tell me if I said something wrong. The first presenter from Bill Gates Foundation, he emphasized the need for strategic partnerships, and he mentioned many different types of partnerships, both within, he also included academia, which sometimes is left out. And beside that, he mentioned both public, private, and the civil society, and the need to make new and innovative partnerships. You also mentioned your, what should I say, goal of trying really to reach a high scale, not only to make this in small pockets, but really to have a great impact. And you had quite ambitious goals to do that. You also mentioned the power of information and access to IT in general, and mentioned and your question if we are in front of a digital revolution. Of course, the importance of involving women we have heard now in all presentations, more or less. And you mentioned your intervention strategy in the whole range of molecules to the market. You go down to the molecular level. You asked if she could move out of poverty. And then you mentioned the revival of agricultural research. And we are in an agricultural research environment. We have a heavy focus on agricultural research. But that's in fact not the case for most governments around the world, even if it has increased lately. We need much more pressure to present the influence of agriculture as a driving force for poverty, to escape poverty in rural areas around, also urban areas around the world. I think that is very important, and ICRISAT can be in front of that. You mentioned the need for innovation to address persistent problems, really important problems, and concentrate on the most important problems, if I understand right. And the public investment in education, which also goes into tertiary pedagogy education, which is a field which heavy under which the investment refer to that. Particularly, we're coming to new trends, new thinking around new interdisciplinary that combines both natural science and social sciences. And we have heard about that. It's very important now during the presentations that we have. And of course, you mentioned the private sector. You couldn't let me. You had to mention the private sector. You mentioned what you would do in India, use a context-based approach, and work with price and reduce and demand and research, biotech issues, reduce losses from postharvest, and link supply chains to future growing and some of the things you were mentioning in your presentation. Then it was followed by our representative talking about gender and closing the gender gap, talking about the gains for closing the gender gaps, and also how that could be done. and the importance of the women. And I think you spelled that very clearly out. I think you mentioned two things that sometimes is maybe not emphasized enough coming to how to close the gap, and that's the focus on social and human capital. I think that's extremely important coming to really be able to include women into a mainstream agriculture research for development. Yeah, you mentioned several things that we have heard several times before as well. And also some new information. I was really thrilled by the fact of the gain from $10. What did you say? $10 increase in women's income have the same gain on health and nutrition as 110 USD in a man's income. That's quite a lot. Anyhow, maybe one thing you didn't mention is that the women's situation has maybe become worse the last years because the farming systems are under increasing heavy pressure. There is lots of different pressures on the agricultural systems. For example, increased climate variability, moving men more or less out of agriculture, increased migration, etc., leaving women not totally alone, but to a bigger extent alone. And also that women's situation may be somewhat generalized. Depends on the socioeconomic group. Women with high access to resources might have a different situation than a women without access to resources. So that's also make both the impact of our interventions different, and the intervention might also be different for these different groups, and that is not so often changed by that. So these are the things I wanted to mention as a summary. I haven't used all the time, we still 23 minutes left. So I thought now, maybe with the main question from my side on the last ICRISAT got this gender policy some few years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, after we pressured it, well, not pressured, it was, that was the wrong word. I was not there. It was really worked on in an extremely good way, I think. Let me put it that way. Better? Yes. And I know that you do a lot now to try to mainstream gender into projects all over the world. But my experience from my work is, and I'm not a gender expert, I can't read it, but still I can see that I have to work with women. Why is it not happening? What's the main challenges? Because all evaluations that are carried out say you have to mainstream gender in a better way. It's not done. And then the same evaluation after 5 years says exactly the same, and 5 years after comes the same. So why is that? Okay, now the floor is open for questions to both of the presenters. Lina?
Different things. One is on strategic partnership. Since we've heard about it, Mark also talked about it. It seems to me that the word private is somehow looked at, private is equal to business, perhaps corporate, maybe not corporate. And couldn't we talk much more about communities? After all, communities are also private, non-government. And the sorts of institutions I was talking about, cooperation, intra-community cooperation, should be an essential element in this. And if we do that, I think the way we think about partnerships will be very different from the way they've been talked about so far. So I would like a response to that. And thank you, Vibor, for that really excellent presentation. There are 2 or 3 points I wanted to make. One was on data. Now, the asset data, gender disaggregated, is, OECD uses it, UNDP used it, FAO used it. Is really, the comparison is between female and male-headed households. And occasionally, for Africa, between like Woodry's work on farms, women's farms in the same family and men's farms in the same family. And I think it's worth emphasizing that because there is a huge data gap, gender disaggregated data. I've been pushing it a lot on property questions that we really do need gender disaggregated. And it's worth then thinking that if you're not just comparing female and male-headed households, what would be these productivity differences? What would they look like? I would venture to say that if you also had information on mixed households, in which, and we have it on the assets of men and women, husbands and wives within the same household, you'd find that you might need less, you'll have less difference in terms of input access, because the husbands, maybe they're migrating, also send back money and so on, and they have access to credit because you may be working as a driver in Delhi, but you go back to the Himachal and then you look after certain things. And with less input, you could actually get much more output. So the gender differences would remain, but your investment, your figures might actually look much more dramatic, because with less investment, you can actually get it up. And the second is the incentive effects. The assumption that women work for the family, but it's not the case. We know from the African literature that, when women weed on their own farms versus if they weed on their husband's farm, there's a huge difference in productivity. So there are intra-family incentive effects which have to be generations. A couple of other very quick things, since this is R&D, is that we do need to think about R&D for women farmers. For instance, there's Cheryl Doss's work, again for Sub-Saharan Africa, which shows that if you actually do the trials on women's fields, it makes a huge difference to adoption. And when we think about more generally disadvantaged farmers' fields, the technology, I was talking to women farmers in Andhra, and they said, the technology is too heavy for us. Why isn't it designed for our use, parts of the other things? So these are things which are practical things which we think about. And on law, what sort of legal aid do we need? Now, Andhra has just done with this portal, RDI, at the government of Andhra, that we need to think about more systematically legal aid, so that if the laws are there, so your thoughts on that?
Okay, should we let them, now we have one question to each, let's let them answer this question first and then we take the rest afterwards. I have a list there, some. Okay, let's start with you.
Thanks for the question. Specifically in relation to the partnerships and the concept. Again, I definitely was using partnership in a very broad sense of the term. It doesn't have a signed agreement, but there's a lot of other ways to partner. And the biggest point I thought I tried to make is it should be context-based in the specific local context, and there's really no general rule. One of the things that in the last 1 year, I was having a few times to India, and I visited Gujarat, Jharkhand, Bihar, all the places in the rural areas. I see that what we do in the research is significantly different from Jharkhand and from Bihar, even though there are some commonalities and thematic commonalities in the general approach. What I saw was an amazing amount of self-help groups which are driven by women, interestingly again, with supported by men. Essentially, men are the followers rather than the leaders, which is what I saw. And where they take on the leadership to drive the formation of the initiative and control the money. And most importantly, which is something which I noticed, was accountability. So the key word being, which is missing, I thought, is accountability. When they become accountable to their actions and then they see the results, it spreads. And that's basically what I saw. And I felt it was such things are possible. That's why I asked you a question about Pradhan. I was with Pradhan also quite a bit in the villages. But why can't it be scaled up is what I'm still struggling with. And there are actually I'm working on a grant right now to scale up the model in this country. But it is just not that simple. I don't have a solution. But I think we'll be doing some experiments in different parts of Bihar, Orissa, and Jharkhand, specifically with the idea of experiment models. Again, context-based. And I really hate to compare with my home state in Kerala, because Kerala is an exception to every rule when I look at development goals.
it really doesn't fit the profile. Neither does Andhra Pradesh, unfortunately. Andhra Pradesh is way ahead. So there are lessons from there, but I think we have to connect. We can discuss it probably a lot on this because we will learn a lot from you. So we're going to start there.
Madam Chair, you asked me the question that I'm not able to answer, and I'm not asking it myself again and again, which is, so, with all this knowledge and with all these good intentions and the experience, and everybody seems to agree that something needs to be done, how come gender mainstreaming still doesn't quite make it? One possible answer to that would be maybe gender mainstreaming as such is not the right approach. I've seen it in my own organization where well-meaning people have been trying to make sure that every single activity takes men and women into account and sort of differentiates between their needs, their capacities, their aspirations, and all that. But what actually happens very often, especially if we are dealing with projects and initiatives that have strong natural science component, the project managers, they don't really know what to do with these types of advices. They just insert the words in their project document, but the real action on the ground doesn't happen. And maybe the second thing which I would like to say, and then it was mentioned in the opening session today, using a beautiful metaphor, I think we can't just stop working on gender because the outcomes have not been as stellar as we hoped. It's very much like the race against the escalator. If we slow down, or if we stop, we for sure will lose it completely. And then, the issues around how should comparisons be really made and what the existing data allow us. I completely agree that comparing male and female households just like that can very much distort the picture, and we can end up with knowledge that's not really relevant for any policy or any remedial action. What frustrates me, for instance, is that comparisons don't really take into account the existing context. It's being the female head of a household in Mexico is a completely different sort of social reality compared to poor sub-Saharan Africa, for instance. The other thing that needs to be taken into account is also the demographic composition of households. That's again the demographer in me speaking. I think we need to appreciate that the demographics of the farm, smallholder farming is very important, at least for two reasons. The demographic composition of a farm household in terms of gender and age, for instance, and also human capital variables such as education and health, all this is a very important factor in terms of who is available to contribute to productive and reproductive activities of the household, what sort of skills and constraints these people face. And the second thing is that farm households are demographically highly unstable due to mortality, fertility, and here I don't mean soil fertility, migration, but also things like divorce and marriage. The age and sex structure of the farms, small farm sector, and the demographic dependencies within the sector change quite a bit, and they can change on the level of individual household very abruptly over a very short period of time. And this has, again, huge implications for production, consumption, resilience, and these things. So there's a huge room for improvement in the knowledge part of it.
Thank you very much for that answer. And then I think we have 10 minutes left, so short questions, short answers.
Okay, thank you, Chair, and thank you to the two speakers. One quick question each. First of all, Prem, on the BMGF strategy, you said that one of your preoccupations was scalability. You made dismissive comments about people that target 6,000 to 10,000 farmers. Could you tell us a little bit more about how you factor in scalability in your grant program? So that's question one. Question two, to Libor, many comments about last year's sulfur closing the gender gap. But FAO, as with IFAD, we've been reacting to that, revisiting our strategy and policies on gender, as indeed is the whole UN system-wide action plan. How did your 7 points in your penultimate slide, or indeed your social relations approach, play in or interact with FAO's 2012 revisited strategy? Thank you.
Maybe we should also try short answers, and then there are several people that would like to ask more questions.
Quick answer, I did not mean to discount scalability. What we're trying to target is, I think as an organization that is one of the larger donors, we really want to reach, find solutions which can be really scalable. So from to that end, even 6 or 10,000 farmers, we have some lessons to learn. So we try to capture those lessons and expand on it. So that's something which we look for in every grant, if it is scalable, or what else can we learn to make it scalable. So that is basically the criteria we use. Because if we cannot reach it, who can reach it? That's the question. I didn't mean to discount at all. The value is tremendous.
You asked about my last 2 slides. Well, they are loosely linked to FAO's take on gender in the future, let me put it this way. What is FAO trying to do is to sort of support and increase our work on gender, both inside the organization, which means sort of gendering the classical agriculture activities of the organization, including forestry and fisheries, trying to understand what is the magnitude of gender disparities in those sectors, what can be some of the entry points for narrowing down the gender differences, and then coming up with practical solutions, practical ideas for transformative action. And here we spend a lot of time and effort collecting good practices and examples of success stories and identify their scalability and transferability from one setting to another. But we also work, as you know, with countries where our primary partners are ministries of agriculture and other ministries that deal with agriculture, forestry, and fisheries. What we are trying to overhaul is our whole approach to smallholders. This is going to be a huge simplification and you may not like it, but let me say it anyhow. FAO is trying to sort of identify what could be the really key entry points for supporting smallholders. And for that purpose, we have identified 3 categories of farmers who need assistance. The first category will be farmers who have access to a reasonable amount of agricultural land and other productive resources, who nevertheless are still underperforming and who suffer from too small productivity, which keeps them under Our solution for those will be very targeted support to smallholder farmers, through policies, through services, agriculture services, through agriculture technologies, and through agriculture organizations. The second category, and again, it's a huge simplification, are farmers who may not have enough agricultural land and who therefore need to go out of agriculture or out of crop production and subsistence agriculture and sell their labor in the market. Here we think the correct approach is to support decent rural employment, and that will are made available. And thirdly, and I think we have not talked about it so much so far, the smallholder sector, it's not only producers, it's not only people who are capable of farming the land. How about children? How about the elderly? How about the disabled people in rural areas? Those count as well. They are dependent on agriculture, but not through their labor, but through the labor in their households. And I think we need to think very carefully about what sort of social protection mechanisms can be made available to them. So we see these as sort of 3 pillars of support for small.
Thank you. We try to make it short, but questions and answers. I think we have the lady from Kenya.
Thank you very much for those presentations. Mine is a big question for the board, maybe clarification. You mentioned on what needs to be done, and you talked of freeing rural women for lucrative initiatives. And I wondered, what exactly do you mean by that, and how can we do it? Because the woman essentially is also taking care of the household.
I think there are two parts to it. One of them is reducing the burden of household work in rural areas. And I think there is a huge room for improvement there. For instance, women who are mothers of small children, they desperately need some sort of support to that. And it can be done if there are opportunities for childcare, full childcare on village level or continental level. This can reduce the burden quite a bit. Technologies for running a household also play a role. We know that the vast amount of energy needed for household use comes from timber. There is a huge scope for improvement in the availability of electricity for households in rural areas. And on the other side of the spectrum would be creation of decent jobs in rural areas.
Thank you. I think we have one from the Indian row there. Did some of you ask questions? Yes, please.
Thank you. Or can I shout?
You can shout.
Okay. Thank you very much. Well, I come from sub-Saharan Africa, where gender issues are in place. I like to support the statement where you said gender issues are complex. That's very true, because they are deeply rooted in the cultural norms of the societies in most of the African countries. Such being the case, what makes me wonder sometimes is we have a number of projects or donor-funded projects which come on board to assess gender issues, trying to mainstream gender issues, and expect to have impact or changes within a short period of time. Yet, these have been rooted in the cultural norms of the society. They have been there for so many years, for ages and ages. We can't expect answers within a short period of time, let's say 2 years, and think changes have been there. And I'll give you an example, like in Malawi, for example. Government has deliberately made policies to reduce the gender gaps in terms of education, employment opportunities. In education, they have even reduced pass marks for girls going into university compared to boys. Girls are at an advantage. In terms of employment, for a man, you can't compete for the same job with a woman. Definitely, you will lose out. Similar qualifications, there's a deliberate move to do that. But then, if you come out and make an assessment and say, okay, is this working or not working? I think let's wait. It's a matter of time, because these things are deep-rooted in the system. There are some people within the society as well too happy with the way things are, having women the way they are. But also, sorry to make the question long. The other thing is, in terms of employment, women are employed, trained in agriculture, but when it comes to employment, they desist from working in extension and live in rural areas rather than live in urban areas. How do you go about that? Thank you.
I think now we should take the rest of the questions. We have 3 more questions. We are eating a little bit into the tea time, and I hope that is okay. If someone opposed, you opposed? You on the list. Okay, then we have 4. And now I forgot who was the first and who was the last, so excuse me for that. I think now we start with Debbie, and then we go around.
Prem, I wonder, maybe it's a little bit related to the talk between Dina and Marco this morning. If there's a fundamental difference that you've noticed as your strategy shifted toward the very poor states in India compared to looking at the broader issues? Or is it more of the same in, are there fundamental differences in the way that your strategies you're beginning to see have to be worked out when you face these additional challenges of extreme poverty?
Yes.
Yes, there's a fundamental difference because the new strategy is evolving on India is much more thought of. Initially, we just shoveled money out. Those grants in India that were made in 2007, 8, 9, we just found an opportunity, draw opportunity to invest. Now we are studying what India needs, what's works, what is required, what are the priorities, and that is the biggest difference. I think we are more calculated, more precise, hopefully more effective. Thank you, Jeff.
Yes, then we have three gentlemen here. Should we start from the start with the first one, Victor? Go down.
Okay, this is not a question but just a comment. In both the presentations, when you talk about gender, it was women. I thought gender referred to both men and women. It was thought to be privileged versus unprivileged. So, but when we talk, we just talk only of women. Why not we talk of children who are underprivileged, other sections of the society who are underprivileged? And when I hear, many times I wonder, are men villains in the whole game? No, because like in the other cases, behind every successful man there is a woman. I think behind every successful woman or self-help group, there are many other men who would have helped. Thank you.
Yeah, well, mine is just a comment for information that I'm very happy that gender issue has emerged very prominently in this session. In March, Asia Pacific Association of Agricultural Research Institutions, ICR, Bill Melinda Gates Foundation, and GFAR, FAO, IFAR, SIDA, and many other organizations had come together to organize first global conference on women in agriculture. 750 participated from 50 countries, and very important recommendations have come. Time would not permit me to go, but many of those have been flagged. I would urge that that synthesis report is available and should be considered for those who are interested in engendering agriculture. Secondly, no doubt time has come that we have to act. Not that we simply go on mentioning that gender is important in agriculture. And in that respect, documentation, disaggregation of information and data, but the main thing is that how you empower them. In that respect, three issues are there, and one is that they must have access to knowledge. And for that, whatever efforts are going on, I compliment that Bill Melinda Gates Foundation has identified this as a priority area. FAO has identified through its report the role of women. Somewhere it is at 15 to 20%. But we have to see whether if it is rice, and if India has the largest area in rice, and if Bill Melinda Gates was working on rice, then women working on rice, transplanting, don't have a transplanter till today, then have we empowered them? Now these are the issues. When you go to Southeast Asia, you go to China, you go to any other countries where rice is grown, there is this kind of empowerment. Here, a lot of tools and small machinery have been evolved. But unfortunately, the corporate sector is not finding to multiply them in lucrative profession. So it's a social commitment, like seed. In the beginning we multiplied and provided. Then private sector came in. Small seeker. We have not been able to provide, but technologically it can improve 30 to 40% efficiency. A small handhold. I mean, I don't want to go into detail. So the question is, how do we provide whatever is available for improving their efficiency? One. Secondly, for knowledge, is it only radio and the mobile? Even in India today, we don't have one dedicated channel on agriculture. And hundreds of channels on all kinds of things. If they are not coming, then who will think of it? And when we will do it? So these are some issues related to knowledge. The last part is the message is that, which I think Prem highlighted, is very clear. If women are empowered, then they are going to lead to not only food security, but nutrition security, and also education and population control. This has happened. I mean, Kerala is the best example, where maximum literacy of women, the least population growth in that context, and it is correlated. Even Himachal showing it, northeastern states showing it. So the question is that we need to now think in terms of taking initiative, because they will not let any food lost. They would try to see that it is utilized. And they are to be provided technologies which are rural based, which can link them to the farmer. And those are the approaches which lead from out of box thinking and new dimensions and new approaches, rather than talking and just saying it will.
That was a good comment. We have that. You have a question, short question, and then we have one there, and then it's Steve. Any more questions? I think you have one question.
Yeah. This is not a question, this is my concern to them, to anybody else. If you look at the last few decades, the women's literacy levels have gone up. The exposure levels to the women has also gone up. The access to the TV, technology, and to the other social activities have also gone up over a period of time across the globe. Now, you can't expect a safe woman to do the same drudgery things in the rural areas, whether small or the larger farmer holdings. Like men, they also expect to do different things in a less rigorous environment, in a less sunshine environment, in a more comfortable environment. You look at Vietnam, Cambodia, Taiwan, or South Asia, large number of women are going and prefer to work in a guaranteed salaries, even with the less, even with 1,000 rupees. Government factories is a classic case. Across South Asia, why government factories are picking up. Shoemaking industries. They're all women moving from the rural areas to the urban areas. Now, are we forgetting this? Now, in such a situation, people look for guaranteed, comfortable environment working conditions. Women, those who doesn't have any option, by force or by chance, then left with a dry land farm, or left in rural areas to work in a heavy sunshine hours. Now, can we do something about it? If you provide 3 things from this symposium, what 3 things that you give us to take home to work in the government operational system like I work in the government? Can you tell us what 3 things that you tell us which will make the situation better in terms of its design of the approach, like Dr. Farad was saying, or in terms of its implementation, improve the efficiency levels to improve the women's conditions? One possibility, I'm not saying this is the final one, as Dr. B. Nagarwal rightly saying in the morning, is a property types. It includes the land, it includes household property. Giving the confidence of the property ownership which makes a big difference in the women ownership titles. Even if 50% are a joint ownership, so that the men drink and don't sell the properties. Women will have a right on the property. Even a joint. Number two, can you enable them certified skills training? There are a huge number of trades, about something like a 400. Can you give them a certified training skills so that they get into better jobs, even in a local area, in a hub and spoke model markets that you can create? That's where the mates foundation can do, what others can do. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Maybe you get the answers yourself?
But I'm just, I'm not saying these are the issues, I'm only saying these are the concerns and the possibilities to be explored, we need to debate a little more. Thank you.
We have one there, can you be very short now? Melinda, you get the final word, but also very short. And then
My
we have,
question is for
now we
Deepak.
will start to walk out of the rooms. We have
My question is for Deepak. And is there any cross-country quantification of non-monetary activities of women in developed and developing countries, especially non-monetary activities of women? Quantification of non-monetary activities of women in both developed and developing countries, so that we can compare across the countries. That is number one. Number two, over a period of time in developed countries, non-monetary activities are converting or becoming monetary activities. As a result, women worker participation rate is increasing, especially in US and European community. This is what.
Okay, can you answer this, that question? The question was, or was this a question to you?
Yes.
No? Tina, you can answer, and then we make that the conclusion.
Just on the last one, there's a huge literature on the care economy and unpaid work. And OECD, in fact, has been trying to develop both in this UN system of national accounts. Has recommended to every country that they include a range of work which has so far not been included, which is unpaid non-market work. And many countries in developed countries have actually already started doing that. In India, we do that, we're trying to do that, but we first need information on time use, how much time is used for particular tasks, and then methods of converting that time into market value. So it is on the cards, it is being done. And I think over tea I can share more on that. Bree, just very quickly, just wanted to say three points. One is, I think the idea that there are certain women who are privileged is not what gender is about. It's about structural inequalities. Just as with caste, you can have ministers who are from low caste, but that doesn't mean it removes the caste inequality. So I think let's not, we need to recognize that we're talking about structural inequality. This is answer to the point you made. Very small scale at the local level, what works in terms of cooperation. And then you federate, so you have horizontal and vertical linkages. And somehow we don't bring that into our thinking about scale. We think if it's scale, it means let's have thousands and thousands all coming together, and of course that's not going to work. So a different thinking about scale and the ability for the smaller groups to contextualize in how they want to work at the local level while linking up for certain activities strategically, then we'll have a very different feel about how we scale things up.
I think that was a very nice last comment. I think I want to thank the presenters and the audience for a very engaged discussion. Have a nice
May we request the chair of this session to please present the speakers. So the first speaker, Prem. And to the second speaker, Dr. livestock. I request you all to please join me in conveying our sincere thanks to our board member, Dr. for sharing this session.